Okay, it's now time for the Nevi'im teaching. I'll be picking up where I left off last week in the second chapter of the book of Ezekiel. I'll give everybody a minute to get there. All right. So last week, the prophet was at the river. And suddenly, the veil of what we perceive to be reality was torn open. And he began to see the visions of Elohim and four creatures, which we will find out later are cherubim. But four creatures, and the way he described them was just awe-inspiring. And he described the very presence, the very Ruach HaKodesh of Elohim appearing like fire and being encased in amber, and the upper portion looked like a man. And I said I believed it was very, very plain that we are seeing, or he is seeing and describing Mashiach in pre-incarnate form. At the very end, I told you it's one of the worst breaks in all of biblical history, where they put in that false break because Ezekiel just kept writing and writing and writing, but they put in a break for study purposes, and they said, and this is the end of the chapter, and the last thing he says was, and I heard the voice of someone speaking. I said next week, which is this week, we would find out who was speaking. So picking up from there, it says, and he said to me, O mortal, stand up on your feet that I may speak to you. And he spoke to me. As he spoke to me, a spirit entered into me and set me upon my feet, and I heard what was being spoken to me. So, a spirit entered into him, and as we talked about last week, impelled him, gave him the willpower then to stand up on his feet and understand what is spoken to him. You know, Shaul tells us in the Brit Hadesh, I believe it's in one of the letters to the believers at Corinth, but in one of his letters he talks about the fact that we don't even know how to speak to or understand our Creator. But only when the Ruach enters into us, then these mumblings and groanings that we utter that mean nothing in the heavenly realms then become something worthy of his hearing, and he will answer us. I believe that is what has happened here to the prophet Ezekiel. That is, the Spirit has entered into him so that now he is able to stand and understand what is being said to him. It says, he said to me, O mortal, I am sending you to the people of Israel. That nation of rebels who have rebelled against me. The nation of Yisrael. The nation who, if you read in one context, the name means the very prince of Elohim. And if you read it in another context, means that they have strived with or wrestled with Elohim. They're not sounding very princely. I shouldn't say they. We're not sounding very princely in this passage, are we? We're sounding like the Yisrael who have wrestled with Elohim. And as my son says in one of his songs that I love so much, I've wrestled with God and he won. We're about to see how Elohim wins when we wrestle against him. They, as well as their fathers, defied me to this very day. Not they did it for a short time, and I think I touched on that last week in Yehudah, his letter, where it says that they sinned continually, repeatedly, over and over. It doesn't say that they stumbled once and got up and walked the path again. It doesn't say that they stumbled, got up, and struggled with that issue, but continually tried to follow him. It says that they sinned continually without end, and that's what's going on here with the people of Israel, with our people, with our ancestors. This should be a warning to us. This should be what makes us sit up and say, I better do better than the ones who came before me. For the sons are brazen of face and stubborn of heart. It means the men are getting it wrong. And what I'm about to say may sound sexist, but it's biblical, so everybody just have to deal with it. If the people are wrong, it's because the men are wrong. And you can say that at every level. You can say it in the level of the family. If my children and my wife are wrong, it's because I am wrong. I can say it at the level of the local fellowship, the synagogue. If the fellowship is out of line, it's because the elders, the Rabbah, and the Shamash are wrong. It's because we've not set a standard that the others can follow. Or we're setting a standard and they're following it and it's the wrong standard. In the community, the town, the city, if the populace is wrong, the leadership, and specifically the male leadership, is wrong. It's outside of his will. And it just continues from there. I send you to them, and you shall say to them, thus said Yahuwah Elohim. It struck me as I was studying on this. He's using both his covenantal name and his primary title. And that primary title, a lot of times, is translated as the mighty one, or the mighty of the mighty, the great of the great, the strong of the strong. But it also, sometimes in the certain context, and I believe this is one of the contexts, means the lawgiver. Okay? So when Melech was just teaching a little bit ago, he was teaching from Torah, he was teaching the statutes and the commandments, the mitzvah, the mitzvot of the covenant into which we were taken as a people. So when he says, thus said Yahuwah, the eternally existing one, Elohim, the lawgiver, he's not saying Yahuwah, your Elohim, or Yahuwah, the Elohim of your fathers. He is saying Yahuwah Elohim. He is saying the eternally existing King. He's not messing around here. Sometimes it's amazing what one word put in a sentence changes the meaning. But you take one word out of how he establishes who he is and his identity, and it means just as much. Whether they listen or not, for they are a rebellious breed. I'm thinking of Shaul again. He says to go out and to tell everyone the truth in season and out of season, to be prepared. To be prepared in season and out of season. That means whether they want to hear it or whether they don't. Whether they beg you to teach them and absorb it like a sponge absorbs water, or whether it's like beating your head against a rock, he says, I am sending you with this message, go. Sometimes we get wrapped up in this idea we're supposed to share the truth if people want to hear it. There's something to that, in that when people are hungry, we need to feed them. When people want it, when they are humble enough to receive it, we should give them everything they can handle. But that does not mean that we should not take the same message to the hard-hearted. It simply means that we're going to have a rougher time doing it. He says, the reason here, he says, that they may know that there was a prophet among them. Do you notice it doesn't say that they may know that there is a prophet among them? Sometimes we are called to give the message, and the people who we present it to don't seem to understand that someone is prophesying. And when I use that word prophesying, I'm using the right Hebraic mindset term, because people misunderstand it. They misunderstand prophecy to be a term of foretelling. Oh, I had a dream, it must be a prophecy. But Moshe in Torah says, what? Don't add to, don't take away. We just heard that in the Torah today. And it's what he's talking about. Later on, he says, if any man comes to you and says he's a prophet, if anyone says this man is a prophet and what he says goes against what is in the Torah, he's a false prophet. There's nothing new coming. That in and of itself is a false teaching. The true Hebraic meaning of prophecy is this: not to foretell, but to tell forth. To go back to the Torah and to the prophets whose prophecies are telling forth of the Torah, and to say, to tell the truth, that is prophecy in the purest form. So when we are called out to tell from Scripture the truth, we are called out to prophesy. We are called out to tell forth from His Word, and we are to do it whether they want to hear it or not. And that can be rough. That can get you stoned. And yet you never know when they're going to know that there was a prophet among them. There's a young man, when I was in New Ross ministering, I reached out to him, and I reached out to him, and I reached out to him, and I believe that it was like water hitting a rock and bouncing off, and nothing was happening. And then we left, and we ran the homeless shelter for a year. And then I was in the car wreck, and then we came back to Southern Indiana, and I was healing up. And 6 years after I shared the gospel with him, 6 years after I believed that nothing I said had mattered to him, he contacted me one day on Facebook to tell me that he had just signed on to be a military chaplain. And he thanked me for being bold enough to share the gospel with a wild kid who no one had any hope for. We must tell them the truth, and someday they will know that there was a prophet among them. And you, mortal, do not fear them, and do not fear their words. That's a hard one. That's a hard one when you go into places where they'll ride you out on a rail because they don't want to hear it. Because they want to trust in their baptism when they were 12 years old, or they said the right prayer that the guy at the revival told them to pray, and there's absolutely zero change in their life. and they don't want to hear it from you, he commands Ezekiel, and I believe by extension he commands everyone called to share the word. Do not fear them, and do not fear their words. Though thistles and thorns press against you, and you sit upon scorpions, do not be afraid of their words, and do not be dismayed by them, though they are a rebellious breed. But speak my words to them. You notice it doesn't say speak your words to them? Part of that social gospel I warn you all against. That happy-go-lucky, feel-good message. One of the wisest elders I ever sat under for teaching told me one time to get back in the pulpit because I hadn't stepped on his toes yet. He said, until I did that, I hadn't done my job. I am so thankful for that advice. Because I felt like I finally realized if it's my job to make him uncomfortable, then any man who stands in this pulpit had better tell us something that makes us double check our lifestyles. But speak my words to them, whether they listen or not, for they are rebellious. Last week I told you, if it gets repeated in Scripture, it's important. If it gets repeated back to back to back, it's extra important that we dig into that, because Ezekiel isn't just writing for his own health, and Elohim isn't just inspiring him for no reason. He's telling us, he's drawing a picture back. It's like when the chorus keeps coming back, that's the theme of the song. Okay? The stanzas in between may be about different things, but the theme and the chorus ties it together. There's a chorus of sorts here that he says, tell them whether they listen or not. And you, mortal, heed what I say to you. Do not be rebellious like that rebellious breed. Remember what Melech was saying? Don't worship like they worshipped, or you'll be worshiping their gods. Same basic message. Don't become the people you're sent to. When we go into the world, we cannot become the world. We must be in the world, but not of the world. Open your mouth and eat what I am giving you. As I looked, there was a hand stretched out to me, holding a written scroll. He unrolled it before me, and it was inscribed on both the front and the back. On it were written lamentations, dirges, and woes. I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of debate among scholars as to what this scroll exactly represents. I have my own opinion. As we go farther into the teaching next week, I will be sharing my opinion. But I encourage you to do some digging on that, because it's a point of contention among some sects of Judaism as to what this means. Even some sects of Christianity divide over what this means, what this is a picture of. So I want to encourage you to do your own digging and see what you think. And true to the spirit of our fellowship, we can disagree on that and still love each other and still fellowship together. But it will be an interesting midrash, I'm sure. And speaking of midrash, that is what is next. Do we have any questions or any thoughts on the teaching?
I think that Israel at this time and for that time and this time is as a whole was and is often rebellious, and that that's why he, like you said, mentioned it back to back, because it's a sin. The sin of rebellions like witchcraft, I think, is what I forget where it says that, but it's something like that. Let's see, was I gonna say something else? Oh, it's when it says in verse 6, and you mortal, do not fear them, do not hear their words, though thistles and thorns press against you and you sit upon scorpions. That's when you're trying to share the gospel and share, good counsel to people that are non-believers that want help. A lot of times that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
From person, it's like you're trying to help them, and they're like, well, here, sit on these thorns and thistles or press on. Let's do it, like, here, sit down here and lay on those thorns and thistles, and sit on the scorpions, and then tell me what about this Elohim of yours, basically. And sometimes I don't think that they even know that they're doing that. That it's not a conscious thing, but it's it's just the spirit that is affecting them. And that's, but we should still try to, do it anyway. Do our best. That's all I have.
I agree. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I'm giving my opinion on something, if that okay, should I just?
Absolutely. This one, big rush is.
Mm-hmm.
I think, similar to what Jordan was saying, I think the state of Israel, along with Britain and the United States, are all in apostasy at this time. There's remnants of people that aren't, just as there was in the time of Elijah, 7,000 hadn't bowed their knees to Baal. And I think that's the way it is in our world today. And I don't think that they understand they're in apostasy, or maybe they don't even care. It seems to me higher education, like many professors and people like that, who actually teach our leaders and the people who become our leaders, they're all in apostasy. They don't really believe in God. They don't believe in anything. I mean, when you start boiling down what they're teaching and stuff, it's so ridiculous. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's like we're living in a madhouse anymore. That's what I mean. If you could go back to I don't mean that my time that I grew up was perfect. I mean, it just got worse and worse until now. Look at it. It's a horrible, festering sore. What must God think?
We're all gone mad.
Yep.
Anybody else? Okay.